Hollywood's golden age looked flawless on the surface. Red carpets, flashing cameras, and actors adored as untouchable icons. But behind the glitz and glamour was a far darker reality. Paul Newman once warned that Hollywood's brightest stars often carried shadows that no audience ever saw. Some used their fame to mask violence. Others hid shocking scandals, broken families, or obsessions that destroyed lives. These weren't just roles on a screen. These were secrets buried under layers of silence, covered up by studios desperate to keep the dream alive. And once you see the truth, you may never look at these legends the same way again. Errol Flynn, the Robin Hood with a hidden shadow. Errol Flynn was once the very image of adventure. His smile lit up theaters. His charisma made men envy him, and women adore him. Photoplay magazine called him the man every woman longed for and every man wanted to be. But beneath that dazzling image was something far more disturbing. In 1942, Flynn stood trial in Los Angeles for charges involving 2 underage girls. Newspapers screamed the headlines across the front page: "Robin Hood in the dock." Fans, journalists, even international correspondents packed the courtroom to watch their hero stand accused. Witnesses described the scene inside his luxury Hollywood Hills apartment. Smoke-filled rooms, all-night parties, and guests far too young to understand the danger they were in. The trial ended with Flynn's acquittal. He left the courthouse smirking, cigarette in hand, and bragged, "The ladies will still love this Robin Hood." That arrogance chilled Paul Newman, who later told friends he had never seen such naked defiance. Hollywood protected Flynn. Warner Brothers couldn't afford to lose their profitable star, and journalists who valued their careers stayed silent. But the rumors never faded. Guests whispered about his infamous Mulholland Drive mansion, where parties stretched on for days. One servant's account claimed Flynn forced guests to sing until he was satisfied, throwing out anyone who resisted. Even his death carried a grim twist. In 1959, at just 50 years old, Flynn died in Canada. The coroner's report described his body as aged beyond 70, worn down by years of excess. Yet the public still remembered him as Robin Hood, the daring hero. Hollywood chose to preserve the legend and bury the truth. But Flynn was not alone. Another star, adored on screen as a glamorous queen, carried darkness far worse, and her own children paid the price. Joan Crawford, Hollywood's queen, and her children's nightmare. Joan Crawford stood on stage in 1946, shimmering in white satin as she accepted her Oscar for Mildred Pierce. Variety crowned her Hollywood's Queen Reborn. The image was perfect. America's beloved star, mother to 4 adopted children, a symbol of glamour and family. But the reality behind her Brentwood mansion doors was chilling. Christina Crawford, her daughter, later exposed the truth in her memoir, Mommy Dearest. The childhood she described was a gilded hell. Clothes hangers became whips. Glass ashtrays turned into weapons. Punishments were rituals of control and cruelty. A maid testified that on the very night of Crawford's Oscar win, she dragged 11-year-old Christina from bed, forcing her to sing the national anthem in front of a mirror. When the girl faltered, Crawford slapped her to the floor. The sound of that blow echoed in the maid's nightmares for years. Classmates recalled Christina wearing long sleeves in July to hide bruises. Diaries from house staff described twisted punishments, standing still for hours as an hourglass emptied, kneeling before a crucifix, while Crawford screamed that she should be grateful for her mother. The cruelty did not stop with Crawford's death. When her will was read in 1977, Christina and her brother Christopher were cut out entirely with the cold line, for reasons which they well know. Newspapers called it the harshest will in Hollywood history. To the world, Joan Crawford was Hollywood royalty. To her children, she was a tyrant who inflicted scars that never faded. And yet, if Crawford ruled her family with fear, another star used his fists to rule his children, leaving wounds so deep they drove them to despair. Bing Crosby, the king of Christmas, the jailer at home. Bing Crosby was the voice of America. His song, White Christmas, sold more copies than any single in history. Magazines painted him as the perfect father. NBC crowned him America's model dad. But Paul Newman once called him a jailer dressed as an angel. Gary Crosby, his eldest son, revealed the truth in his memoir, Going My Own Way. Winter nights were filled with fear. He remembered clutching a pillow, trembling as footsteps approached. Then the door would burst open and the belt came down across his back. Each lashing left him wishing he could disappear. On Larry King Live, Gary wept as he described a father who never hugged him, never praised him, only glared with cold eyes as the beatings rained down. His brothers carried the same scars. Lindsey Crosby trembled whenever he heard Christmas music, the songs triggering memories of pain. Dennis Crosby left a final note before ending his life. Every Christmas, the nightmare came back. I'm too tired. A year later, Lindsey followed the same path. Hollywood knew. Musicians heard the shouts, the cracks of violence, the sobs of children. But speaking out meant the end of a career. Studios needed Bing Crosby's wholesome image, so silence buried the cries for help, while White Christmas kept playing across America. Paul Newman dismissed the excuses, saying Crosby beat his children because he enjoyed control. On stage, he mastered an audience. At home, he demanded the same obedience, and he took it with violence. While Crosby's cruelty destroyed his family, another Hollywood legend wielded seduction like a weapon, leaving behind broken hearts and shattered lives. Marlene Dietrich, the goddess manipulator. Marlene Dietrich was more than a star. She was a presence. When she entered a room, silence followed. With sharp eyes and a cigarette holder poised like a sword, she commanded attention. She was admired for her beauty, boldness, and mystery, but those who fell into her orbit rarely escaped unscarred. To Dietrich, relationships were tools of power. Love was never about sharing, it was about control. Jean Gabin, the French cinema legend, sank into isolation after Dietrich left him. Writer Eric Maria Remarque was drained financially, his royalties vanishing into her luxury spending. In Hollywood's hidden lesbian circles, her rumored affairs with Greta Garbo and Mercedes de Acosta left lasting scars. Friends said Garbo withdrew further into solitude after their connection, while de Acosta died destitute, shunned, and forgotten. Even Edith Piaf, France's greatest singer, collapsed under the weight of their affair, turning deeper to alcohol and pills. Piaf once sobbed backstage that she had given everything to a love that only ever existed on one side. Even her daughter, Maria Riva, wrote of being neglected, left backstage for hours while her mother chased new lovers. She described a childhood spent watching her mother use people like props, discarding them once their purpose was served. Paul Newman, who narrowly avoided her manipulation, once said, Marlene treated human emotion like playing cards. She played better than anyone, but behind her were only losers. If Dietrich wielded seduction like a blade, Hollywood's so-called golden boy wielded something even darker. His target was one of the most beloved actresses of all time, when she was barely a teenager. Mickey Rooney, Hollywood's golden boy with a dark obsession. Mickey Rooney was MGM's shining star. The Andy Hardy films made him the symbol of innocence, the little guy with a big smile who captured America's heart. In 1939, Life magazine hailed him as the biggest star of his generation, but Elizabeth Taylor remembered him differently. She was only 14 when Rooney, nearly 25, began pursuing her. After National Velvet turned her into MGM's treasure, Rooney saw her as prey. Classmates recalled Taylor wearing thick sweaters in summer to shield herself from his gaze. In her diary, Taylor described sleepless nights and feeling trapped in MGM's gilded cage. She confessed to friends that Rooney frightened her more than anyone else. MGM silenced it all. Rooney was their golden goose. Columnists hinting at his behavior were forced to retract stories. Hollywood made sure his reputation stayed pure. Behind the scenes, Rooney was volatile. He screamed at crew, hurled props across sets, and bullied young actresses. Ava Gardner, one of his 8 wives, said living with him was like living next to a storm, never knowing when it would strike. In later years, he spiraled into debt and poverty. He claimed Hollywood abandoned him. but insiders whispered it was simply karma for the cruelty he once inflicted. And yet, as dark as Rooney's shadow was, another Hollywood giant carried an even more disturbing reputation, one that haunted actresses for decades. Kirk Douglas, the dark side of Spartacus. Kirk Douglas embodied masculinity. He was Spartacus, the defiant warrior, a symbol of courage and strength. But behind the screen legend were rumors that persisted for half a century. The most chilling story concerned Natalie Wood. In 1954, when she was just 15, her mother arranged a meeting with Douglas at the Chateau Marmont Hotel. Hours later, Natalie returned shaken, her clothes disheveled, her eyes hollow. In her sister Lana's memoir, Natalie's diary entry read, "Mother said I must stay silent if I want to keep acting. But I feel filthy, like everything has been stolen from me." The story never reached the public until decades later. Studios buried it, protecting Douglas at all costs. When Natalie Wood drowned under mysterious circumstances in 1980, journalists wondered if her secrets were tied to her tragic end. Other actresses whispered of Douglas's obsession with young girls. A wardrobe worker claimed refusing him meant career suicide. Some even alleged he recorded his encounters. Despite the whispers, Douglas was honored with the Medal of Freedom and an honorary Oscar. While audiences applauded, veteran actresses traded silent, knowing looks. Paul Newman summed it up coldly. "Spartacus may have been a hero, but Kirk Douglas was never a hero. At least not to the young girls he hunted. If Douglas spread fear through hidden predation, another Hollywood queen terrorized everyone around her in plain sight." Bette Davis, Hollywood's fiercest on-set tyrant. Bette Davis was hailed as one of the greatest actresses of her era. Her performances burned with fire. Her voice could slice through dialogue like a blade. But for those who worked with her, Davis was no goddess. She was a nightmare. Her temper was legendary. She screamed at co-stars, humiliated crew members, and turned sets into battlefields. During Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, her feud with Joan Crawford reached violent extremes. In one scene, Davis shoved Crawford so hard she ended up hospitalized with bruises. Davis later shrugged. If she got hurt, that's her problem. Crawford retaliated by hiding weights under her dress, forcing Davis to strain dangerously during filming. The movie was a success, but behind the camera, it was war. Davis's cruelty wasn't reserved for rivals. Errol Flynn once described being slapped so hard during filming that he felt humiliated for life. Young actors were reduced to tears by her public insults. Even crew members froze when they heard the echo of her heels, bracing for the storm. Paul Newman once said, "No one denies Bette's talent, but I've never seen a woman spread so much fear on a set." And if Davis scarred reputations with her rage, another Hollywood giant scarred lives with his fists, and may have even been tied to a mysterious death. Wallace Beery violence and a Hollywood cover-up. Wallace Beery was one of MGM's highest-paid stars in the 1930s. His role in The Champ painted him as a tough but tender father. But off-screen, his violence was notorious. His name became forever linked to the death of Ted Healy, the man who created the Three Stooges. In 1937, Healy was involved in a nightclub brawl. Witnesses described a huge man, matching Beery's build, throwing brutal punches. Hours later, Healy was found dead, his body covered in bruises. Just 3 days later, MGM arranged for Beery to leave for Europe. The LAPD closed the case, calling it alcohol poisoning. Journalists suspected one of Hollywood's most blatant cover-ups. Beery's brutality didn't stop in nightclubs. On set, he tormented child actors, slapping and tossing them around. Mickey Rooney recalled being struck so hard he fell flat to the ground. Crew members wrote of child extras flinching whenever Beery came near. His private life was just as dark. Actress Gloria Swanson, his ex-wife, revealed in her memoir that she fled the marriage after violent assaults. Paul Newman once remarked, "On screen, he played a tender father. Off-screen, he spread terror with his fists." And Swanson herself, though a victim of Beery, later became infamous for destroying entire productions with her ego. Gloria Swanson, the diva who crushed careers. Gloria Swanson was silent film royalty. She swept into theaters draped in sequins and fur, commanding attention like a queen. But her ego was as colossal as her fame. During the doomed film Queen Kelly, She demanded entire sets be rebuilt because the colors didn't flatter her. Crews collapsed from exhaustion, budgets exploded, and the production fell apart. Hundreds of workers lost their jobs. Even during the Great Depression, while Americans stood in bread lines, Swanson ordered gowns encrusted with thousands of crystals, sometimes just to wear once. Critics accused her of living in delusion, and her arrogance left her isolated. By the 1950s, her career was in ruins. In Sunset Boulevard, she played an aging star lost in fantasy. Audiences shuddered, recognizing it wasn't just a role, it was Swanson herself. Her obsession with luxury burned her career to ashes and dragged countless filmworkers down with her. But Hollywood's tragedies weren't only about ego, abuse, or violence. Sometimes they ended in blood on the street, with a promising star gone far too soon. Sal Mineo, the doomed star and Dangerous Secrets. Sal Mineo was once hailed as the next James Dean. His performance in Rebel Without a Cause electrified audiences, but being open about his homosexuality in Hollywood came with brutal consequences. Contracts vanished, roles dried up, the press mocked him. By the 1970s, Mineo lived in fear, but also carried secrets that could shake the industry. Some claimed he had a dangerous affair with Paul Newman himself, one that could never be revealed. In 1976, Sal Mineo was stabbed to death outside his West Hollywood home. Police called it a random robbery, but witnesses described contradictions. The murder weapon disappeared, testimonies clashed, and strange financial records hinted at powerful hands ensuring the case went quiet. Paul Newman attended the funeral in silence. Soon after, Mineo's apartment was mysteriously ransacked, diaries and documents gone. A building manager swore he saw a man resembling Newman enter late at night. Whether rumor or truth, Newman's own words haunted the story. He once said, "Hollywood killed Sal, not with a knife, but with silence." To some, it sounded like an accusation. To others, a confession. Mineo's death remains one of Hollywood's great mysteries. Was it random violence or a silenced secret too dangerous to expose? Hollywood's golden age gave the world unforgettable stars and timeless films. But behind the smiles and applause were shadows of abuse, manipulation, cruelty, and secrets buried beneath red carpets. Do these legends still deserve admiration? Or should their darker sides force us to see them differently? One thing is certain, Hollywood was never just a dream factory. It was a stage where devils wore stars' clothing. And the next name exposed might be the idol you still admire today. So make sure to subscribe to stay tuned.